When did you become the very thing you swore to destroy? My 14-year-old self was proud, arrogant, and could get away with holding very strong opinions and could get away with being abrasive with them. Naturally, I had a lot of people who I marked as inferior or enemies. Today, I think it would be in the crosshairs of my past self. I used to have extremely strong moral principles to a ridiculous degree. I said I would never swear. Nowadays, I don't really have that barrier, but I also understand when to use it for effect. You lose that effect by swearing 24/7. I also said I would never ever be violent or even threaten violence. Later, I threatened my bully in front of the whole class, and I'm now learning martial arts, so I would have a last resort if push comes to shove. I used to insult depressed people, autistic, and ADHD people for having little self-control. You get the idea. Guess who's seeking help now for mental health problems to get back on their feet? Let's just say that if my early teenage self saw who I was today, I'm the person he'd hate the most. I guess it only makes sense that out of the teens that I worked with, the few who seem to gradually dislike me for no reason are the ones who I see the most of my past teenage self in. Guess the only threat his past self sees now is the shadow of his own former arrogance. Story 2. Okay, this one is very personal, so it'll be hard to keep it short. I used to be really talented at music. Bragging is worthless and contains no real information, and I only want to give context to my perspective. So I'll just give some facts. All 4 years of high school, I made it into all 4 county and state honor bands, and after my sophomore year, was first chair in all of them. I turned down a full-ride scholarship to Berklee College of Music to go study under one of my idols at a different, similarly reputable school. My freshman year, I skipped all the undergrad ensembles and played lead or principal chair in the grad student groups. Philharmonia, concert band, jazz orchestra, chamber ensembles, etc. During my undergrad, I won all the school solo competitions, made the podium in 2 international solo competitions while being the first contestant in 30 years to compete in both the jazz and classical competitions in the same year, and had the chance to play with such greats as Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Ravi Coltrane, Taylor Eichste, musicians who performed in major movie recordings, etc. Everywhere I went, I was constantly punching far above my weight for my age and receiving constant affirmation and open doors from very successful people around me. It might make your eyes roll for me to say this after listing all those things, but I was modest. That's the point of me writing this. It was easy for me to be. I never wanted to talk about my own accomplishments. I loved playing with people who were better than me. I never felt threatened by it. And I idolize humble heroes. I only later learned that being satisfied with who and what you are is a huge part of maintaining that attitude. It was hugely important to me to stay humble. Not only were all my heroes humble, but I saw a connection between that attitude and that pursuit of nirvana with your craft. These were some observations I made during that time in my life. Being modest isn't just about being polite. It is about not valuing praise over the thing itself. If you waste time trying to get everyone to praise you, you aren't practicing your craft. Playing music is the reward, not being complimented afterward. Being upset when someone is better than you is so backwards. The most successful people I ever got to play with didn't care if someone else was better. They relished it. I saw examples of this all over my real life and in stories. Goku was super talented but loved fighting with someone stronger than him. It made him grow and learn. It was truly fun to test his full ability against someone else. That's a productive and humble mindset. He never doubted his own worth. He just wanted to keep growing and make a positive difference in the world. Vegeta, on the other hand, was arrogant and fully preoccupied with needing to be better than everybody else. He frequently finished second place or worse. I saw the same thing happen in real life. People who were the best were happy and met every challenge with gusto. People who were petty and jealous let that get in the way of their own improvement and always struggled to keep up. Then, right before my master's degree, I had to have some dental surgery that changed the shape of the inside of my mouth. I almost completely lost my ability to play. My musicianship remained, but I'd lost the physical lightning in a bottle that made it easy for me to play. Finishing my master's degree was hell. I did it, but I was limping by in last chair in almost every ensemble. No matter how hard I practiced, I never got it back. I worked my way back to being able to play at a decent level, but it always felt like running on a broken leg. Then I noticed myself begin to change. I became jealous of those who were still incredibly good. I dealt with frustration poorly in the practice room. Before, when I was frustrated at a challenge, I could believe in myself and try with full heart until I surpassed it. Now, when I couldn't get something to work like it had before, I became furious and sad. All the things I used to think were holding other musicians back were suddenly taking over my mind. It began to creep into my non-musical life, too. I discovered interpersonal problems I'd never experienced before. I had self-esteem issues, and even found out what feeling depressed can be like. That was years ago. I'm in a much better place now. I've learned to play music for pleasure without feeling crippling loss. I've regained my confidence and sense of self. The experience taught me a lot of harsh lessons. Mostly that it is easy to be humble when you have a lot of faith in yourself. It's like a beautiful person saying you shouldn't worry about your looks. Yeah, well, they never had to. I still believe in all the qualities my heroes exemplify: honesty, humbleness, bravery in meeting challenges, acceptance of one's own imperfections, etc. I only now know that it is much, much harder to embody those things when even your hardest work only results in mediocre results. However, I believe that trying is worth it for personal growth anyway. When a person has learned to accept and believe in themselves, whether they're highly skilled or not, they've achieved the same golden reward anyway. Happiness, the joy of experiencing the beauty of life, and wisdom are not locked behind a certain threshold of achievement. This is what I fear about aging, no longer being able to do the things you once could do with ease. Story 3. Oh man, this touched a big nerve. For me, it was ballet, not music. I was extremely good as a teenager, and it was my plan for my whole life. I had auditions set up for schools and companies right out of high school, ones that reached out to me, not the other way around. And if you were involved in ballet in my hometown, you knew who I was. This isn't a brag, just context. I was only good because I loved it, and I didn't care about recognition. I just wanted to be able to do it forever. And then I broke the growth plates in my knee, and it never healed right. But I couldn't dance anymore. Not like I used to anyway. I still loved it. I could still do it to an extent, but the high level of technicality I had would never be there again. There were some things that were now completely off limits for me. It became apparent very quickly that I wouldn't ever be able to do this professionally. I watched people I used to dance with get the opportunities I never could. I became jealous and bitter and mean. I punished myself for having the accidents in the first place, slid pretty deeply into an eating disorder, and lost all my ballet friends because I was so impossible to be around. I don't blame them. I don't like who I was then either. I was furious because this wasn't supposed to happen to me. That was years ago though. I don't dance anymore because my knee still can't take it, but I've reached out to some people who knew me back then who are now enjoying moderate to high levels of success. One dances with Oz Ballet now, and is working his way up to being a principal with him. Not in a related field, but I'm proud of my career. I guess the lesson I learned is how to cope with crushing disappointment, and how sometimes terrible things happen and it's nobody's fault. I'm very resilient now. That's what makes me so good at my job. Wallowing in self-pity is unattractive and useless. You gotta pick yourself up, stop blaming everyone, and try a different tack. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 4. Ex-atheist Christian here. So I was raised Christian only in the sense that Jesus and God were about as important as Santa. I remember as a child, once I figured out Santa wasn't real, beginning to question if God was a big lie made up by adults as well. By the time I reached adolescence, I realized I had no real reason to believe in God and began identifying as an atheist. I believe in no gods. I pondered the subject greatly and decided that it made much more sense that all religions were wrong rather than one being right, that there was no hard evidence for God, and that everything in the Bible sounded like absolute nonsense, especially in the light of my education in the sciences. The thing is that I understood that nothing could possibly matter but the answer to the question, do I have a purpose? And I never stopped seeking if there was an answer. Nothing else was worth seeking, so I never stopped thinking about that very subject. All the conclusions I came to, everything I saw pointed to religion being utter nonsense. Religious being the foolish and the uneducated, and that all of life and existence was some random accident that just happened to occur and would be over as soon as it started. I never questioned that stance until the day I had a good friend talk to me. He didn't have incredible thought-provoking statements, he didn't have nearly any answers, but he had faith. I was mocking this man to the face for the beliefs he held dearest, and he was brushing aside my rudeness as if it were leaves in his path. His message was clear. It was that he knew that there was a God and that he was Jesus Christ. He confessed himself that he didn't have all the answers, but he knew religious leaders I could talk to that did. He was sure. I laughed off the entire conversation at that moment, but I distinctly remember in the moments before I fell asleep that night, asking myself, could I have been wrong all this time? It was the first time I was no longer 100% sure there was no God, and it opened a new chapter in my life. I'd spent years finding every single reason to not believe in God, but had never taken the time to consider that there might actually be reasons to think that he exists. and I began to see them. The fact that the theme of human existence is the struggle between good and evil points directly towards him. Without God defining good and evil, all of our struggles, all of our dreams, all of our desires, all of our love, all of it was just a bunch of complex chemical reactions. Everything I knew told me that all we experience and live is real. It's tangible. I was living it. Not only this, but I realized that this universe was made so that life, the only thing that could give existence meaning and purpose, could and would occur. Whatever caused this universe to happen made it so that it could and would have purpose. That demands sentience. That demands God. These thoughts continued for a month until I realized one day that it was true. It was all true. There was a God, and his love for us was so evident. The love of a God that puts breath in our lungs, the love of a God that lets the sun shine on our backs, the love of a God that lets us look into our loved ones' eyes is the same God that multitudes had claimed to have witnessed to walk this earth in the flesh and lay down his life to save us. Everything became so clear at that moment. That night was the most incredible night of my life as I fell on my knees in repentance of my sins, willing to follow Jesus as my Lord. I received the Holy Spirit and was born a new man who put all of his sin behind him in that moment. I went to all those in my life, all those I had instilled my brand of atheism into, and professed to them that I was wrong and that they needed to repent as well. I had found myself in the midst of a group that was getting more heavily involved in crime to fuel our usage. I was laughed at and quickly found myself living my days alone. It's been quite a few years since that day, and I now find myself in a thriving church community that is living in obedience to Jesus. I couldn't even begin to explain to you the joy and mirth of knowing your Creator, of knowing your purpose, and of knowing your family that you will go to spend eternity with. This world is just the beginning that only those who are willing to repent of their sin and obey God will find eternal paradise to be their end. If I hadn't found Jesus, I know I would have been found guilty at the judgment of my sin and justly been condemned to an eternal hell for what I had done. My Creator loved me enough to give me a second chance, loved me enough to seek me and show me his love, loved me enough to walk the earth in the flesh and end at the hands of his own creation so that he could pour out his blood as payment for what I had done. He rose from the afterlife to the witness of hundreds and has given his spirit to countless thousands so that we could know that this was the truth. Story 5. I had nightmares about my wife, who I hid from my religious organization that I'd otherwise devoted my life to, suffering and pain and fading. I learned from a friend the tragedy of another man who had done everything he could to control life, but ironically, couldn't save himself. The power to save life was forbidden to our religion, and none would teach the power to me. And when I realized that my friend and later mentor, in fact, did practice those forbidden arts, I reported him to the council. My friend first would have been subject to a trial, but because he was the Senate and would decide his own fate, the councilors decided that he was dangerous, and he easily ended 3 of the 4 arresting him, and was finally defeated by the last of them. I arrived and realized it isn't in the way of our religion to judge who should live or end, no matter how powerful, especially when his victim was so weak. So I leaped in as the final counselor. Think Samuel L. Jackson type, cool guy, miss him, tried to finish him and took his hands off. My soon-to-be mentor used his powers. After that, I pledged myself to his leadership, as I realized that my religion was hypocritical at best and evil at worst. In fact, they were evil. My master taught me to deal in absolutes. He turned the army into treasonous and heretical religion, and I personally made sure that none of the children were poisoned by it. And we began to reconstruct the fragmented government into a new empire. I went to meet with a separatist faction, and with my negotiation skills, I quickly came to an agreement with them, as they were already pawns for my new master anyways. And my former mentor showed up, a pregnant wife with him. He claimed I was the evil one, and turned my wife against me. I pleaded with her as he manipulated the circumstances, eventually leading her to be in such poor condition. He then attacked me, utilizing the high ground to his advantage. When he left me for good, burning in lava, I thought back to what he had said. Perhaps I'd become the thing I swore to destroy. But I made that vow not knowing that my old religious cult was evil, that it would end in my wife's passing. I couldn't save her, but I relied on my anger, and with my mentor, the Emperor, we created a strong government and spread peace throughout the empire. I may have become the thing I swore to destroy, but in the end, I believe it worked better for everyone. If only I had started sooner, I could have saved Padme, raised my family with her in peace under our new rule.
You were the chosen one, Anakin. It was said you would destroy the Sith, not join them.
Story 6. Worked in a grocery store for about 3 years after coming to the US. Most people that worked there seemed to look down on people that worked in fast food places, so me being a stupid 16-year-old said, my only promise to myself is that I'll never work fast food. I had to move away from that area after I graduated from high school in the middle of the pandemic. And I couldn't find a job anywhere, so I decided to try and get a job at McDonald's. Because my illogical, as unnecessary pride wasn't going to pay my bills. Managed to get a maintenance job that pays 1/3 more than I used to get before, and I'm basically doing most of the same tasks. The people that work there are amazing in their own way, too. Being there helped me realize that nobody should feel better than anyone else based on how they put their food on the table. This life is disordered, and every one of us is only trying to see another day, for our loved ones and ourselves. Story 7. Bankers. Fallen to the dark side. Started a punk rock band with college pulse-high buddies when 18, sworn to take down capitalism and being true equality. We're now 30 and still playing, but bassist is a trader, the drummer is a banker, and I'm a portfolio manager. Looks like we've always had similar interests. Our fairly recognized song is a crowd chant where it goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, take it down. Now I have a 401k that I'm trying hard to grow. In my profession, I rely on capitalism so that people's pension funds can meet payment obligations for the future. It's a lot of work, but I get paid pretty well and live in a nicer neighborhood now. The recent GameSpot stock surge was like taking candy from a baby. Taxes are kind of hard to deal with, so I'm always trying to find new ways to avoid or deduct them. Obi-Wan would be frowning at this. Along the way in my profession, I met an investment banker who is now my wife. Her bank abuses the tax incentives for green energy to churn instant profits. These profits, being her bonuses, get converted to her Tiffany jewelry and Chanel bags. I ask if it bothers her that the profits come from the cost of taxpayers. She says that it's because the 99% are stupid. We have fallen to the dark side. Story 8. Kind of late, but I sunk back down into poverty after trying to rid my family, namely my mother, from that stress. I was a first-generation college student in my family, and we were relatively poor growing up. Still had a good life, but we didn't have much money to go around with 5 kids and a single mom. I did well in high school, so I gave college a chance. I haven't been doing great mentally, and I can't afford therapy or meds, and it really affected my academics. Semester went downhill, and I lost my loans. Now I owe $9,000 in order to go back to school, which I can't feasibly pay back anytime soon. Trying to afford rent, car maintenance or insurance, phone bills, food, and all else really bad a minimum wage. Especially when your credit is bad, so no private loans for me. I wanted to beat poverty and I swore to myself that I'd help my mom out of there too once I got a good job. Instead, I let my emotions get the best of me for a semester, only to ruin my chance at a degree. Now I have all of that debt knocking on my door with nothing to show for it. Not at least for the next 15 years. I have a few more days to try and come into that money, so maybe I'll cherish the $50 left in my bank account by buying some lottery tickets. Story 9. I go to a conservative church. I love my church. The people are great. However, I started to notice a growing radicalization among our teenage boys. It's weird to have teenage boys in church, and even weirder to have teenage boys really into theology. So the boys were petted, praised, and seen as amazing. Everyone seemed to think it was great, but no one seemed to realize these guys had become ultra-conservative, more interested in establishing new rules and order than concentrating on Jesus. They became little Pharisees. I watched it happen and decided to challenge the leadership about it, concerned for the boys themselves and how they were affecting the girls. The youth leader gaslit me for years. He would say he agreed with me, but then kept pushing ultra-conservative views on me. I was aware of their manipulation at first and thought I was so smart and he wouldn't get to me. But it did. I soon found myself falling more and more into that trap. It was only when my family were talking about a topic that I used to agree passionately with, I found myself disagreeing and saying the ultra-conservative side. I knew that I'd been worn down. I was talking to the young boys one day and we were talking about the church elections for committees. I mentioned I would leave the church if women would not be allowed into those leadership roles, which was what the ultra-conservatives were pushing. One of the guys turns to me and says, "You're allowed to vote. That's all the responsibility a woman should have in the church." It cut me deep. I then went outside and noticed the youth were in an area they weren't allowed in. The youth pastor then asked me to go and shout at them. I realized that he always made me do all the dirty work. This man, who preached that strong men need to run the church and women should be silent, couldn't even shoo some children. I went and shooed the kids and then had a wee cry in a room. Boom, church elder appears. Church elder is also a therapist. I'm like, I just wanted to cry this out so it doesn't make me deal with my emotions. He makes me deal with my emotions. So it all just came pouring out how I was tired of being in a church that didn't believe I had a voice worth listening to. I'm tired of being treated like a second-class citizen because I'm a girl, but expected to do the dirty work. I'm just so done. Magic church elder therapist is like, what in the actual world do you know our church agrees with women in leadership? Why do you think we're going to change that? It was at that point I realized I'd been gaslit to think this ultra-conservative group were the majority and people like me were the minority. Church elder is angry. Why are our kids being brainwashed? He gets me calmed down and sends me on my way. Over the next few days, loads of the women in my church, especially the mothers, come to me and say they agree with my cause. The revolution begins. The minister casually decides to do a sermon on why women are allowed to be in leadership, making it clear where the church stands. The church selects 10 new people to the committee, 8 of whom are women. The committee is now 50-50. Any illusions that it's a liberal few pushing women in leadership is shattered. The kids mellow out as they're faced with the real world. Youth pastor leaves and then hires a woman. Old youth pastor even admits she was the best candidate by far. The youth dynamic shifts. That's how I became what I hate and then rediscovered what I believed and accidentally started the revolution by crying within earshot of a church elder therapist. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.